Martha Lou was young and beautiful when she married the charming Caleb. It seemed her happiness would last forever. But everything changed once Caleb got hooked on cards. Martha worked from dawn till night, pushing herself to the limit, just to cover her husband's gambling debts. While she wore herself out, Caleb spent his nights in saloons, never bringing home a single dime. Over time, the backbreaking work and constant worry stripped Martha of her looks and her strength. And then, the one time Caleb got lucky and won a big pot, he didn't thank his wife. He betrayed her. He ran off with a young singer, mocking and humiliating Martha for the weight she had gained after years of exhausting labor. Welcome to Weathered Stories. Today I'll tell you about a woman left alone, broken, and humiliated by the man she trusted most. Can Martha recover from such pain? Can she ever trust a man again? Will she find her own happiness? If you want to know her fate and how it all ends, hit that like button, and let's begin. New Mexico Territory, late 1870s. The town of Red Rock Crossing sat on a muddy Pecos River, surrounded by desert and winds that never stopped blowing sand down the main street. Crooked signs creaked on rusty hinges: Hank Doyle's Saloon, Dr. Weiss's drugstore, Mrs. Brown's boarding house. By day the street was yellow with dust. By night it was black and empty. From the break of dawn, Martha Lou was already on her feet. She hauled laundry from the boarding house herself, heavy wet sheets clinging to her shoulders like stone. The water in the barrels was ice cold. Her hands stung from the chill. Faster, faster, or I'll fall behind again, she told herself. She hung the sheets on the line, and the wind whipped them hard, as if trying to tear them away and carry them down the canyon. Afternoon came the cowboy shirts, torn, crooked, stiff with sweat and blood. The needle fought the tough cloth, her fingers peppered with tiny pricks, and every slip drew a thin bead of blood. Martha Lou only shook her head. It'll heal later. At the diner, she stirred stew for the work hands, smoke from the stove stinging her eyes, the heat pressing her down. She kept the pots moving, one hand braced on her aching back. By evening, she walked to the drugstore, scrubbed floors, ground herbs in a mortar. The owner only glanced her way, gave a nod, and left. Her knees throbbed, but she pushed on. Supper was a crust of bread eaten on her feet, washed down with water. Her hair, damp and tangled from the heat, she tied back with a rough cord just to keep it out of her face. Her hands were red and cracked all over. Just make it to the end of the week, she thought. Martha Lou slept no more than 3 hours a night. She lay down in darkness, rose again before dawn. The house greeted her with emptiness, a dust-covered table, and a note from her husband on a torn scrap of paper, scrawled in crooked letters. I'll be late again tonight. She sank into a chair. The lamp flickered in the draft, casting shadows that made her face look 10 years older. Martha Lou rubbed her eyes and let out a long breath. This is the life I live. Caleb Hart was Martha Lou's husband, a young man, tall, dark-haired, quick with a smile and quicker with his hands. In the first years of their marriage, he had worked on a ranch, but he gave up that hard labor, insisting he had a gift for winning at cards. Since then, he called himself a professional gambler, spending his days and nights in Hank Doyle's saloon. Martha Lou knew what that word, professional, really meant. It brought nothing home but empty promises. Every evening he pulled a few coins from her palm. Just for the buy-in, he'd say, "Tomorrow I'll bring back 3 times as much, you'll see." His eyes shone like he believed it himself. She opened her hand in silence. What else could she do? Maybe this time, maybe once he would bring home bread instead of debts. But mornings always ended the same. Caleb returned pale, with swollen eyes, his shirt wrinkled. No money, not even a simple sorry. Only a flat, "Luck wasn't with me tonight. Tomorrow will be different." Then the same footsteps on the creaking floor, the door slamming, and emptiness behind him. At the well, women had long been whispering when Martha came for water. He lost it all again last night. One would lean to the other. And his poor wife works herself half to death. And for what? Words tossed out like gossip, but spoken loud enough for her to hear. Martha lowered her head, lifted the bucket, her shoulders shaking from the weight and from shame. Sheriff Tom Briggs saw it all too. He passed Caleb on the road some mornings, then later cast Martha a heavy look in the evening, stern but not cruel, as if to warn her, keep your distance from this, woman. Don't let yourself drown in his debts. And every night, the same ritual. On their table lay scraps of paper with other men's names and numbers, IOUs. Caleb dropped them there, not even trying to hide them. Martha Lou carefully stacked them, squared the edges, as if order itself could hold her steady. She didn't burn them, didn't tear them up. She only stayed quiet, her chest heavy, her mind circling the same thought. How much longer can this go on? There was no answer. Day after day, Martha Lou carried the house and her husband's debts on her back. The money she earned slipped away like water through her fingers, and the work only piled higher. Laundry, stew pots, mending clothes, nights at the drugstore. It all blurred together without sleep or rest. And waiting at home weren't kind words, but new scraps of paper with other men's names and numbers. Caleb had lost again, and again he promised that tomorrow everything would change. She tried to stay strong, but her body failed her more often now. Her head spun, her legs felt heavy as lead, and a pulling ache grew low in her belly. She was afraid to admit it even to herself. A new life was growing inside, and she felt it slipping away. Just hold on. Just make it through. Please, not now. One evening, while rinsing laundry at the barrel, a sharp pain tore through her. She barely caught herself on the edge before collapsing. A neighbor rushed over, crying out in fear, and called for help. That was how Martha ended up in the infirmary. She lay on a narrow cot, pale, her forehead damp. The doctor looked down at her with tired eyes. His voice was calm, but each word cut deep. You've lost a baby, Mrs. Hart. You must take care of yourself. You need complete rest, no heavy work. Otherwise, it could be worse. Martha nodded. She knew. Rest was impossible for her. Who would bring in bread then? Who would pay his debts? She wanted to cry out that she had no choice, but the words stuck. She only rose, thanked him, and walked out. The sun burned her eyes. The dusty wind stung her skin. She stopped by the wall, leaned her back against it, and covered her face with her hands. The tears poured on their own, hot and bitter. Her whole body shook. Why? Why again? I tried so hard. Home met her with silence. She didn't even take off her shawl, just sat by the basin of laundry. Her hands moved on their own, out of stubbornness. If I stop, it means I admit it's over. Late that night, she glanced at the cradle in the corner. She and Caleb had built it with their own hands. Back then, he'd said he'd be the best father. Now the cradle stood empty, hauntingly empty. Martha stepped closer, let her fingers run over the wood. She lifted from the chest a tiny knitted cap, white, the stitches uneven. She held a long time, until her fingers went numb. Then she rose and set it away on the highest shelf. The chest closed with a heavy thud, as if placing a period on it all. She sat at the table, wrapped her arms around her shoulders, and went still. The house was so quiet she could hear only her own breathing, uneven, lonely. Since Martha Lou's last miscarriage, it felt as if her life had finally broken for good. There was no joy left, no strength. The doctor said she needed rest. But what rest could there be, with her husband's debts pressing from every side, and the need to eat every day? She went back to work, but her body no longer obeyed her. After the sickness and the loss, everything inside her had changed. The doctor said her hormones were off balance. She hadn't understood the word, but she felt it. Hunger became endless. Her hands reached for bread and sweets, while her strength slipped away. Her face rounded. Her dresses grew tight. She lost her breath just climbing the stairs. Will I be this way forever? She asked herself, turning away from the mirror. The town noticed, too. Whispers followed her everywhere. At the market, two women leaned over a stall, looking her way. She's gotten so heavy. Poor thing, one said, her tone sounding almost pitying. And her husband keeps gambling it all away. Yes, that's what I heard too, the other added. They say his debts are huge, and she works herself to the bone, for nothing. Martha pretended not to hear. She lifted her basket higher, as if the weight could drown out the words. But inside, her heart clenched so tight it stole her breath. They're right. It's all true, and there's no escaping it. That evening she went into Hank Doyle's saloon to earn a little cleaning. The owner saw her and handed her a couple of extra coins. "Here, Martha. You might need it," he said offhandedly. She took the money, but pain twisted in her chest. This wasn't wages for her work. It was charity. Still, she thanked him and walked home. Out on the street, she crossed paths with Sheriff Tom Briggs. He gave her a short nod, said nothing. Yet his eyes held no contempt, only pity. At home, Martha sank wearily into a chair by the window. In the distance, the lights of the saloon flickered, as if calling someone else. He's there again, she thought. In the cards, in the laughter, in his world where I have no place. She sat for a long time, until the lamp burned out, staring at those lights. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Martha thought of only one thing. What is all this for? The answer came on its own. A word about a big tournament in Santa Fe. News of it spread through town faster than the wind. Folks said the prize was something no one had ever seen. A sack of silver and a gold watch on top. Men talked about the size of the bets, while women shook their heads. Families will be ruined. The men will carry everything there. Caleb drank in those conversations hungrily. His eyes lit up in a way they hadn't in a long time. That evening he burst into the house, charged with excitement, and started right in. "This is my chance, Martha. I'll come back a new man, you'll see. Everything will change. It'll all be different this time." She stayed silent. How many times had he said those words before? How many times had he promised a fresh start? Yet in his voice now there was such certainty, such fire, that for a moment even she wanted to believe. That night, Martha Lou woke to a creak. Pale moonlight fell across the room, and she saw Caleb standing at the dresser, a tin in his hands. The very one where she had saved coins for years, tips from laundry, pennies from stew at the diner, a few coins from mending jobs. Every cent she had guarded, tucked away in that tin. He tried to open it quietly, but the coins still rattled in the silence. Martha Lou held her breath. Tell him, stop him. But she had no strength left. She closed her eyes halfway and pretended to sleep. Her heart pounded so loud she thought he might hear it. Caleb poured the money into his pocket, shut the tin, and set it back. Her savings, gone in a minute. He pulled on his jacket, his face set, as if heading into battle. "I'll be back with money," he whispered firmly. "Everything will change, you'll see." The door slammed, and his footsteps faded into the dusty street. Martha walked to the dresser, picked up the tin. The cold metal burned her hands. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the empty bottom for a long time. The emptiness in the tin echoed the emptiness in her chest. All my years of work, all my hopes, all gone with him, into his cards. There were no tears, only a dull heaviness she held tight against herself along with that empty tin. The Golden Spur saloon in Santa Fe buzzed like a hive. Shouts, laughter, glasses clinking. It all rolled together into one roar that made Caleb's heart race. He sat at the table across from hard-faced players. Cards stuck to his sweaty palms, but the smile never left his face. Inside he burned with fire. This is it. My fate gets decided right here. The hands dragged on painfully slow. Each card felt like it dropped from the heavens. And every time his heart stopped, sweat poured down his forehead. His fingers trembled, but he held himself steady. The crowd whispered behind him, eyes glued to his every move. And then, the final hand. Caleb looked down, and his eyes widened. For queens. At last, luck had found him. He placed his bet, his voice shaking, but he forced it steady. His opponent hesitated, then pushed it all in. Caleb laid down his cards. The crowd erupted. Cheers, whistles, slaps on the back. Everything at once. His ears rang, his vision blurred with joy. I did it. I'm no failure. I'm no small-time loser in a dusty saloon. Now I'm somebody. Now I'm a winner. The dealer stepped up with a sack of silver and a gold watch. Caleb took the prize, his hands trembling as he clipped the watch to his vest. He felt the weight on his chest, the weight of victory, a victory he believed had turned his life around. And then he saw her, Sandy Black. She had been sitting by the stage through the whole tournament, never once glancing his way. But now her eyes burned with interest. She rose, walking slowly toward the table. Her wine-colored dress gleamed in the lamplight, curls spilling down her shoulders. She laid a hand on his shoulder, soft, sure. "Well now," she whispered, leaning close. That was some game. Caleb caught the scent of her perfume, sweet, heavy. The crowd roared even louder when she suddenly kissed him right there in front of everyone. Her hot lips, her closeness, it all spun together. His heart pounded harder than from the wind itself. She's looking at me. The one every man wants. The one so beautiful, so desired. She never even noticed me before. But now I've got silver. Now I've got a gold watch. Now I'm different. Now I'm rich, successful. I deserve her. He thought of Martha then. Her heavy breathing, her tired eyes, her hands always full of work, her body gone soft. No, she dragged me down. With her I was nobody. But now everything's different. Now I'm finally alive. Sandy, she's my woman. With her, I'll be respected. With her, I'll be the man I was meant to be. Sandy smiled, running her hand across his chest. He gave in to that touch, to that temptation. Inside, there was no doubt left. The decision made itself. I'm starting a new life. And there's no place in it for Martha. He laughed loud, held up the watch for all to see, and with his other arm pulled Sandy close around the waist. The night was his, and he decided he'd never go back to what he left behind. That night was the longest Martha Lou had ever known. She sat by the window, staring out into the dark, waiting. Caleb had always come back before, sometimes near dawn, sometimes broke and worn out, but he always came home. Now he was gone. The hours dragged like stones, her heart tightening with every tick. Maybe he'd passed out drunk in some ditch. Maybe someone had beaten him. Lord, please, just don't let it be trouble. By the time daylight crept in, she couldn't sit still any longer. She stepped outside and met Sheriff Tom Briggs. He stopped, took off his hat, and looked at her with eyes that made her heart drop. "Mrs. Hart," he began softly, like he was searching for the right words. "Your husband, he's all right. But, better you hear plain. Last night, he won the tournament. A big pot. And," the sheriff hesitated, then said it straight, "he went to the hotel with Sandy Black." Martha went pale. The words didn't land at first. She shook her head. No, Tom, that's a mistake. Caleb couldn't. He promised. He said when he won, everything would change. We'd live like in a dream. He couldn't do this to me. Tears welled up on their own. She turned so the sheriff wouldn't see her face, but her voice trembled anyway. "If you don't believe me," Briggs said heavily, "go see for yourself. They're at the Grand Hotel." She walked there without feeling her feet. On the way she kept whispering, almost aloud, "Mistake. It's a mistake. He promised. He's not like that. He loves me. He couldn't." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't even try to wipe them. The hotel room door was ajar. Martha pushed it open and stepped inside. The air smelled of wine and smoke. Caleb sat on the bed in a brand new suit, Sandy beside him in his shirt. They were laughing, touching, her hands sliding across his chest while he kissed her. It looked like they hadn't even noticed morning had come. Martha froze in the doorway. Something inside her broke. Caleb looked up, saw her, and instead of shame his face twisted with anger. "You..." His voice was sharp, loud. "What are you doing here?" She stepped forward, barely finding the words. "Caleb, tell me this is a mistake. We talked about this. You said after you won everything would change." But he jumped up, shoving Sandy aside. "Change, yeah," he sneered. "Only without you. You've been dragging me down, Martha. Never believed in me. Never appreciated me. I've lived poor all my life because of you. Look at yourself. You're fat as a cow. You think I need that? I'm a successful, rich man now." Sandy chuckled and wrapped her arms around his neck. Caleb, drunk on his own spite, began to laugh loud and cruel. His laughter was sharp, mocking. Sandy joined in, and the room filled with that vile echo. Martha couldn't stand it. The world spun before her eyes. She bolted into the hall, then down the stairs, not even knowing which way she turned. Her head was a fog. She barely remembered reaching the street, climbing into a carriage, making her way home. The tears never stopped. When she stepped into her empty house, her hands trembled. Her heart hurt so bad it felt like it might burst. She sank onto a chair, buried her face in her hands, and whispered, "Why? Lord, why?" There was no answer, only silence, and the humiliation that pressed harder than any poverty ever had. She pushed herself off the chair and fell onto the bed, still in her dress. Her eyes fixed on the ceiling and didn't move for hours. Her chest burned, her stomach twisted. It felt like something had scorched her hollow from the inside, while a heavy stone pressed her down from above. She lay there the whole day, unmoving. Outside, the lights shifted, footsteps echoed, vendors shouted their calls. Inside, the house was dead quiet. She heard only her own breathing, the pounding of her heart in her ears. He laughed at me, laughed with that whore. I lived with him so long, gave him everything, down to the last drop of myself. And he called me fat, said he didn't need me. Those words circled round and round. She gripped the blanket, bit her lips until they bled, just to keep from screaming. By evening her body refused to obey. Getting up to light the stove, striking a lamp, even sipping water, she had no strength. She lay in the dark, as if already in a grave. Her head was heavy as stone, her eyes burned dry, but she couldn't cry anymore. The tears had gone with her last strength. At dawn she tried to rise. Her legs shook, buckled beneath her. Her forehead burned, her whole body trembled with chills. Coughs tore through her chest, her breath rasped like an old woman's. She knew she was sick, but one thought wouldn't leave her. If I don't go, tomorrow there'll be nothing to eat. He betrayed me, disgraced me, but work is all I have left. She staggered into her clothes, pulled a shawl tight, and stepped out. The sun stabbed her eyes, dust rose from passing wagons, and every step made her weaker. In the pharmacy, the sharp smell of herbs and spirits struck her so hard her head spun. She tried to keep steady, wiping shelves, arranging bottles, but her fingers wouldn't obey. When she lifted a bottle of tonic, her hands shook and the glass slipped. It shattered, shards flying across the floor. Martha dropped to her knees, the room swimming before her eyes. "Martha!" the shopkeeper shouted, running toward her. She tried to answer, but only a rasp escaped her throat. Her body gave way. Voices swam farther and farther off, like through deep water. Hands lifted her by the shoulders. Someone cradled her head. "Get her to the clinic. Hurry," a voice barked. She felt herself carried through the street, caught faintly the neigh of horses, the pounding of hoofs. Sunlight stabbed her eyes, then dimmed. Only darkness remained, and the thud of her own heart in her ears. Consciousness came back slowly. First there was a smell, sharp, bitter, a mix of alcohol and herbs. Then muffled voices, close, but as if through a wall. Martha Lou forced her eyes open. A white ceiling, a narrow window, a stripe of light. She was lying in the clinic. She tried to move, but immediately felt a hand on her shoulder, gentle but steady. She turned her head and saw him. Dr. Elias Monroe. Tall, a little stooped, dark circles under his tired eyes. A touch of gray at his temples. A clean white coat. He sat beside her with an expression she hadn't seen in years. Genuine care. "I'm here," he said softly, calmly. "I'm not going anywhere." Martha blinked, hardly believing it. She remembered him as a boy she'd run to the river with. Remembered his awkward confession. "I love you, Martha." She'd laughed then, told him she had other dreams. Soon after she'd met bold Caleb and followed him, leaving Elias with a broken heart. After that, it was as if he vanished. She only heard rumors. He studied in Santa Fe, then Albuquerque, then came back as a doctor, but never visited their town. And now here he was, holding her hand, as if nothing had changed in all those years. How are you here?" she whispered, struggling for breath. "Came back just yesterday," he answered quietly. The town asked me to fill in for the old doctor while he's sick. I came to the clinic this morning and heard right away they brought you in unconscious. Folks told me you'd collapsed at work. They also told me about your loss. I couldn't stay away, Martha. It hurt just hearing it. You shouldn't have to go through this alone. He dipped a cloth in cool water and laid it on her forehead. She tried to rise, but he gently pressed her back. Stay down. You're still running a fever. I need to work. She began, her voice breaking. No work, he said firmly, but without anger. You're in my care now, and I won't let you destroy yourself. She looked at him, her heart tightening. Why is he being like this? I hurt him back then. I chose someone else. I broke his heart. He seemed to read her thoughts. Yes, Martha, he said softly. Back then you left. I thought I wouldn't survive it. But that's not what matters now. You're sick, and I won't leave you. Don't be afraid. The words were simple, but she couldn't remember the last time anyone had said them to her with such kindness. A tear slid down her cheek. Elias wiped it away with the edge of the cloth. His fingers touched her skin lightly, tenderly. Rest, he said. Everything else can wait. The days in the clinic passed slowly, almost unnoticed. Yet each one held something new, something Martha Lou wasn't used to. Her life had always been nothing but endless work, worries, and exhaustion. Now Elias was beside her, and in his presence, even the simplest things felt different. He came early every morning, before the sun filled the room with light. He'd set down a small pitcher of water, a slice of oatmeal bread, and a cup of warm herbal tea. You need to eat, Martha, he'd say gently, but in a tone that left no room for argument. You've lived too long running yourself into the ground. Now your only task is to heal. Everything else can wait. At first she resisted. She turned her face away in embarrassment when he helped her sit up. She whispered almost guiltily, I have to work. If I don't show up, they'll fire me. I can't just lie here doing nothing. But Elias only shook his head, smiling with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. I've already taken care of it. I spoke to your bosses myself. At the pharmacy, the boarding house, the laundry, they all agreed. You're on sick leave. No one will fire you. Don't worry. You don't have Caleb's debts on your shoulders anymore, and you sure don't need to break your back for pennies. I'll see to everything. Martha fell silent, unable to answer. Her chest tightened, caught between shyness and the sudden lightness of his words. But, money, she tried weakly. Elias gently took her hand and interrupted. Don't think about that. I'm here, and I won't let you drag yourself back into the hole you barely climbed out of. She looked at him, and tears welled up on their own. I don't deserve you being so kind to me, she whispered. You do, he said simply. You always have. In those moments, she remembered most sharply that awful day at the hotel. Caleb laughing, holding Sandy by the waist, the cruel words that cut her to the bone. Fat, useless. The memory burned, and she found herself slouching, covering her arms with folds of her dress, ashamed of her body. But Elias seemed to sense her shame. Not once did he give her a look that could wound her. Instead, he handed her the cup of tea and said softly, as if it were the most natural confession, You're still beautiful, Martha, just as you were when we were young. The words stunned her. She lowered her eyes, but inside it felt like ice melting. A tremor rose in her chest, one she hadn't felt in years. God, could I really still be beautiful, still be wanted? The days rolled on. Each morning, he brought her bread and tea. At noon, he insisted she rest. In the evenings, he led her on short walks in the yard, steadying her by the elbow so she wouldn't stumble. He spoke with her slowly, gently, as if afraid his words might hurt. They would sit on the porch, the wind stirring her hair. You've been through so much, he said, but life isn't over. You can always start again. She listened, unable to look away. Her heart ached with both warmth and pain. She compared the two men, Elias, soft, caring, genuine, Caleb, greedy, harsh, cruel. And inside her, a new feeling grew. She feared to name it, but it already warmed her at night. For the first time in many years, Martha Lou fell asleep without tears. Beside her bed, Elias dozed lightly, his head resting on his arms. She looked at him before closing her eyes and thought, how did I live all those years without this kind of care? 2 months had passed since Martha Lou first opened her eyes in the clinic and saw Elias at her bedside. The illness had retreated, her strength returned, and she barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her cheeks glowed with color again, her skin cleared, and her steps grew steady. The weight that once burdened her and drew her husband's mockery was slipping away quickly, helped by rest, good food, and work that no longer broke her but gave her purpose. She never went back to her old jobs. No more laundry, no more kitchen, no more sweeping floors in the pharmacy. Her place was here now, in the clinic beside Elias. Officially he was the doctor and she only his helper, but everyone knew it was he who insisted she be given the chance to stay. Each morning they met in the yard, exchanged a glance, and the day began. There was a warmth between them, not yet spoken love, but a closeness that made both of them feel calm and whole. Sometimes, when their hands brushed over bandages or patient records, they'd both look away quickly, though in their hearts they knew they could no longer imagine life apart. Martha Lou worked through the days. She sorted bandages, boiled water, laid out instruments. Elias showed her how to change dressings properly, how to check a fever. She learned quickly, carefully, and soon was greeting patients herself whenever he was busy. One afternoon a farmer with a cut arm came in. Elias stepped back and nodded to her. Go on, try it yourself. Martha took the bandages, cleaned the wound gently, and wrapped it with steady hands. The farmer nodded with gratitude. Thank you, Mrs. Hart. His voice carried no pity, only respect. Another time a boy of about 10 came in, trembling, hiding his face at the thought of a needle. Martha knelt down, met his eyes, and said softly, Just a moment, son. I'm right here. Her voice was so gentle and sure that he stopped hiding, bit his lip, and let her finish. It went smoothly. His mother thanked her over and over. The townsfolk began to look at her differently. No longer the weary woman buried under her husband's debts, but a calm, capable helper at the doctor's side. Even Hank Doyle, the saloon owner, showed up one day, clearing his throat awkwardly before leaving a crate of soap by the door. For the work you're doing here, he said. Sheriff Briggs came with a few coins from the town's fund, adding, let go toward medicine for the poor. You think about that more than anyone else. These gestures shook Martha deeply. For the first time in years, she heard gratitude without pity, only respect. That evening, as they sat on the porch, Elias turned to her. I want to offer you a permanent position here, as my assistant, with proper pay. Martha lowered her eyes and answered quietly, then let part of it go to medicine for those who can't afford it. Elias smiled at her. You haven't changed, Martha. Always thinking of others before yourself. She blushed, but smiled back. That night, as she drifted asleep, one thought stayed with her. How peaceful, how good it felt to be at his side. Maybe this was what happiness truly was. One evening, as Martha sat on the porch beside Elias, the weather suddenly turned and a storm rolled in. Thunder rumbled, lightning flashed, and rain lashed the roofs as if trying to wash the town off the map. An hour later riders came galloping into the yard. Their horses were foaming, the men soaked through. One of them shouted from the gate, Doctor! The stagecoach overturned to the ford. There are injured people, trapped in wreckage and mud. Elias sprang up at once, grabbing stretchers and his medical bag. Martha Lou didn't hesitate. She threw on her shawl and ran with him. At the ford, the ground had turned to sticky ruts. The coach lay on its side, wheels buried in muck. People shouted and tried to pull free. Elias shed his coat and started hauling the injured out, while Martha Lou rushed to those sitting stunned on the bank. She covered them with cloaks, smoothed their shoulders, murmured calming words. Count the children, someone yelled. They counted. Everyone was alive except for one girl, about 8 years old. She was found off to the side, sitting on the wet ground, clutching her ankle. Her dress was muddy, her hands scraped and raw, but she didn't cry. She only stared with wide, frightened eyes. Martha sat down beside her and took her hand. Easy now, sweetheart. I'm here. Let's breathe together. Look at me. 1, 2. She breathed slowly and steadily until the girl matched her. The trembling in the little body began to fade. The girl clung to Martha's hand and wouldn't let go. At the clinic, Martha washed her with warm water, cleaned the scrapes, and braided her hair so it wouldn't get in the way. Then she warmed a cup of milk and brought it to the girl's lips. Not a single tear fell. The child kept clutching Martha's sleeve as if terrified she might be left alone. Late that night, after all the wounded were tended and settled, Elias came over and spoke quietly. I found out this girl has no one. Her parents died 6 months ago. They were taking her to the orphanage. She's all alone. Martha looked down at the child. Rose, that was the girl's name, had dozed off with her forehead resting on Martha's hand. In that instant, Martha knew her answer without needing to think. I will not let her be left alone. I won't send her to the orphanage. I know all too well what it is to face emptiness with no one by your side. If I could not raise my own child, then I will give everything I have to this one. She nodded to Elias. There was a calm, certain acceptance in her eyes, as if she had always known this would happen and had only been waiting for fate to bring the child to her. The clinic was quiet. Rose had fallen asleep quickly, worn out after the long and frightening day. Her breathing was steady, her face peaceful. Martha Lou tucked the blanket around her and felt a wave of relief. Outside, the storm still rumbled, but inside the room there was calm. Elias stepped out onto the porch, and Martha followed. The evening air was warm, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. They sat side by side, silent for a long time, listening to the rain dripping from the roof somewhere in the distance. You know, he began at last, his voice low and unsteady. I loved you back when we ran barefoot to the river. I loved you the day I told you, and you turned me down. And when you left with Caleb, I thought my heart would split in two. He paused, drawing a deep breath. I left to study not because I wanted to, but because I had to run. Staying here, seeing you with another man, I couldn't bear it. And yet, all these years, that feeling never left. I tried to forget. I couldn't. Now I know. I can't live without you. Martha lowered her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. Oh God, Elias. I was such a fool. I thought I needed someone bold, someone who burned bright. And all along, you were the one who loved me honestly. Forgive me for that mistake. Forgive me for breaking your heart. She raised her eyes and whispered, but now I love you too. With all my heart. I've never met a man more gentle, more kind. He took her hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she held on tight, as if afraid to lose him again. Their eyes locked, saying more than words ever could. Elias leaned in, brushing his hand against her cheek. She caught her breath. His lips touched hers, soft at first, then warmer, hungrier. Martha answered, and in that kiss poured out years of silence, pain, and longing. It seemed endless. They wrapped their arms around each other. His hands drew her closer, firm but tender. Her fingers traced his shoulders. A fire lit in her chest, desire they had both feared too long. Let's start over, Martha, he whispered into her hair. Stay with me. Forever. She pressed against him, her voice trembling, yet sure. I swear it, Elias. I'll never leave you again. I'll be with you till the end. They kissed again, hungry, desperate, as though every lost year drove them closer. Her fingers gripped his shoulders like she feared he'd vanish if she let go. His arms held her tight, sending a shiver of heat through her body. Her heart pounded so wildly it seemed ready to burst free. She felt his breath against her lips, hot, unsteady, while her own came fast and uneven. Her eyelids fluttered, her skin burned where his hands touched. She reached for him, all the years of loneliness narrowing into this one moment. The kisses grew deeper, more urgent. Their bodies pressed close, searching for one another as if to become one. Each breath, each touch, only fanned the flames of a longing that could no longer be denied. They gave in. The warm night of whispered promises turned into a night of passion. And in that night, at last, they surrendered to everything they had longed for and feared to admit. The morning after was quiet and gentle. A cool breeze slipped through the cracked window, carrying the smell of wet earth left by the storm. The rising sun lit the edge of the curtain and spilled a warm glow across the bed. Martha Lou opened her eyes slowly, as if afraid to shatter a dream. But it wasn't a dream. Elias lay beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. He was looking at her, calm, tender, with a love she had once thought existed only in her imagination. That steady gaze made her heart tighten. She smiled, unable to hold it back, and brushed his lips with a soft kiss. He answered gently. Their mouths met again, lingering longer this time, filled with warmth and gratitude for finally being together. Martha pressed against him and whispered, "Elias, I can't send Rose to an orphanage. She already feels like my daughter. I can't bear to lose her." Her voice trembled, and without realizing it, she clung to him tighter. He held her, his hand resting in her hair. "And you won't," he said firmly, but with tenderness. "We'll keep her. We'll raise her together. You'll be her mother, and I'll be her father." She lifted her head, eyes wide with hope. "Together?" she asked, almost afraid she'd misheard. Elias smiled, looking straight into her eyes. "Martha, marry me. Let's not just be side by side. Let's be a family. I want to be your husband and Rose's father. I want a home with you, a home filled with love, not pain." Her eyes brimmed with tears. She covered her face with her hands, but the tears streamed anyway. "Lord." "Elias, yes. Yes, I will." Her voice shook with joy. He gently pulled her hands away and kissed each palm. "Then it's settled," he said softly. "We'll be together, and Rose will never be alone again." She leaned in him once more, laughing and crying all at once. Never before had Martha felt such happiness. Inside, it was as if after years of darkness, she had finally stepped into the light. And in that light, there were three of them: him, her, and the little girl who from now on would be their daughter. The trials, the pain, the humiliation, all of it was behind them now. Life was turning a new page, one filled only with love, care, and quiet joy. But in a small town, peace never lasts long. Within just a few days, whispers began spreading through the streets of Red Rock. Folks at the well, women at the market, men lingering in the fabric store, all were talking about one thing. Caleb was back in town. Some swore they'd seen him slipping around the back door of Hank Doyle's saloon, hunched, unshaven, in a worn-out coat, looking like nothing but the shadow of the successful man he once pretended to be. Others claimed he'd come back broke, trailed by a mountain of debts that weren't even his. And then there was the talk of Sandy Black, how she'd left him behind in Tombstone after he lost the last of his silver. Martha Lou first overheard it at the market, standing between two stalls. Two women leaned close, speaking in hushed voices. "That was him, I saw it myself. Looks 10 years older than he is." "Older? Huh. What he needs is a job. But you watch, he'll crawl right back to the cards." Martha kept her head high, pretending not to hear, but inside her chest tightened. The memory of that day in the hotel room came rushing back. His laughter, his cruel words, Sandy's smirk. The pain cut through her again. But now she had Elias by her side. She had Rose. She forced herself to keep her face steady, to show no trembling lips, no weakness in her eyes. "I won't let him destroy my life again." That evening, she told Elias. He listened quietly, though a shadow crossed his eyes. "I already heard," he said. "Hank's setting up a card game. Not a big one, but just the kind that draws men with nothing left. Caleb will be there." The morning was clear and dry, the street outside the apothecary breathing its usual dust. Martha Lou carried a basket filled with bandages and herbs Elias had asked for. She was just about to step inside when she heard footsteps, harsh, unsteady. Caleb appeared before her. He looked as if the years had crushed him into nothing. His face hollow, eyes red, lips trembling. And before she could say a word, he dropped straight to his knees in the dust. "Martha!" His voice cracked. His hand shook as he reached toward her like she was his last chance. "Forgive me. Give me one more chance. All those nights, all those cursed cards, I didn't mean it. I swear I was weak. But you You were always my home. Take me back to life. Let's start over." His words tumbled out between sobs. Tears streaked his dirt-stained cheeks. People stopped in their tracks. Some whispered, others stared. The scene was pitiful. The once proud gambler groveling in the dirt before the very woman he had broken. Martha froze. The basket in her hands tilted, but she held firm. Her heart pounded, not from pity, but from memory. The long nights waiting, the endless work to pay off his debts, the child she lost from exhaustion, the sound of his laughter with another woman. From the doorway of the clinic, Elias stepped quietly outside. He saw it all. Caleb on his knees, Martha with a basket, the circle of onlookers. He started forward, then stopped. He stayed in the shadow of the porch, fists clenched until his knuckles went white. His face was calm, but pain flickered in his eyes. He remembered the day he'd already lost her once, and he knew now he couldn't take away her right to choose. Martha stayed silent, too long to be just hesitation. Caleb kept talking, reaching for her hands, his voice breaking, his words desperate, and the crowd held its breath. With every plea, every tear, it almost sounded like he might truly change. "I was a fool, but you know, Martha, I always loved you. Please, one more chance." His voice rasped on the edge of a sob. Still she said nothing. Her eyes lingered on his face, unreadable. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Lord, she's not really going to forgive him, is she?" In the shadows, Elias's fists tightened. Time itself seemed to stop. Any second now, she might reach out, and everything could be undone. Caleb lifted his eyes, full of desperate hope. He stretched out his hand toward her, and in that instant, every heart watching clenched. "No, Martha, don't do it." The silence grew unbearable. Then, finally she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but clear as a church bell. "I don't hate you, Caleb. I forgive you, but I won't go back." The crowd gasped, then fell into a hush. Not a sound moved on the street. She looked straight at him. No anger, but no weakness either. "I love Elias," she said, firmer now. "I'm staying with him." Caleb buried his face in his hands and let out a broken sob. Martha stepped forward, took his arm, and helped him rise from the dirt. "Stand up, Caleb. You made your choice that night in the hotel room with Sandy Black. Now I've made mine." She lifted her basket and turned toward the clinic door. Elias had not moved, but when she raised her eyes, she met his. In his gaze there was no jealousy, no doubt, only warmth and respect for the woman who had endured so much and now stood tall, unafraid. She stepped into the clinic, clutching the basket to her chest. Behind her, the noise of the street slowly faded. The crowd had scattered, and only Caleb remained, standing in the dust, as if he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. His shoulders shook, his arms hung limp at his sides. He looked around, searching for something to hold on to, but met only the cold, indifferent stares of strangers. By evening, they found him in Hank Doyle's saloon. The tables were full of players already, and though Caleb had not a penny to his name, he sat down like a man ready to win it all back. At first, the cards teased him with a few small victories. He smirked, crooked and defiant, as if to say, "Look, luck has returned to me." But it didn't last. Confidence turned to recklessness. The bets grew larger, his hands trembled. One loss followed another. His face twisted with anger as he slapped the cards away and barked for a new deal. Hank kept his ledger open, writing down each debt without a word. Two strangers, smooth-faced, cold-eyed gentlemen of fortune, sidled up, sliding Caleb a handful of bills at a steep price. He grabbed them without even looking, desperate. The regulars traded glances. They knew where this road ended. The final hand came, and with it, nothing. No money, no cards, no hope. Caleb's face drained white as chalk. Slowly, he pulled the last token from his vest, the gold watch he once flaunted so proudly. He set it down on the table, as if cutting loose the last piece of his past. Without a word, he stood, slipped out through the back door, and vanished into the night, never meeting a single eye. The next morning, Sheriff Briggs stopped by the clinic. His words were short and steady. He's gone north. Slipped out in the night. Creditors are after him, but I don't reckon he'll be back. No letters ever came. No word followed. And before long, Caleb's name in Red Rock was spoken only in passing. Just another tale of how the cards can lift a man up and then break him for good. A month had passed since Caleb's name vanished from the town's gossip. Red Rock carried on with its life, while the infirmary home was filled with a peace and light Martha Lou had never known before. That day, in the small church of Red Rock, she and Elias became husband and wife. The bride wore a simple light dress, with a ribbon in her hair. The groom, neat in his suit, looked both solemn and deeply moved. The whole street turned out for the wedding. Women held flowers in their hands. Men took off their hats, and Rose, in her little Sunday dress, beamed as she clutched their hands. When the pastor spoke the final words, and they sealed it with a kiss, the townsfolk burst into warm applause. Martha Lou wept, but these were tears of joy. A few days later, they finalized the papers that made Rose their daughter in the eyes of the law. But the papers hardly mattered. She had long since been calling them Mama and Papa, and every time Martha heard that word, Mama, spoken so tenderly, her heart swelled. That evening, after all the bustle, the three of them sat together at the wooden table. The fire crackled in the stove. The table held mugs of milk and a loaf of fresh bread. Rose chattered away, promising to help tend the injured and to learn reading so she could write down recipes for her papa the doctor. Elias listened with a smile, while Martha looked at the two of them, hardly able to believe this was truly her life. When the girl ran outside to feed the chickens, Martha placed her hand gently on Elias's and whispered, "Elias, I have news for you. I'm expecting a child." He froze, as if he couldn't believe his ears. Then he leapt up and pulled her into his arms so tightly that she laughed through her tears. His eyes shone, and he kept repeating over and over, "Dear Lord, Martha, thank you. This is a miracle." Tears streamed from both their eyes, but they were tears of happiness. At that moment, Rose burst back inside. She had caught the last words and jumped with joy. "Really? I'm going to have a baby brother or sister," she cried out, her voice ringing. Martha nodded, and Rose clapped her hands, twirling around the room. "Hooray! A baby brother or a sister," she sang, laughing. The three of them embraced. Laughter filled the house, and for the first time in many years, Martha Lou no longer felt like the abandoned, humiliated woman she once was. She was a joyful wife and mother, with a life ahead full of love and hope. A few more years passed. Time moved gently, and the happiness of their family only grew stronger. The house that had once held nothing but weariness and sorrow was now filled with laughter and the voices of children. On the porch, on a warm summer day, Elias sat in a rocking chair with their little son in his arms. The boy reached for his father's beard with tiny hands, giggling so sweetly. Elias laughed with him, lifting him just a bit into the air, and the child squealed with joy. Beside them, Martha Lou adjusted the baby's blanket, watching with a heart so full it nearly overflowed. She reached out, took her son from Elias, and held him close. The boy buried his face in her shoulder while she softly sang a lullaby, the one she had never been able to sing to her lost children. Now her voice was steady and tender, because at last she had those she lived for. In the yard, Rose ran about. She had grown taller, her hair shining in the sun. The girl leaned close to her baby brother, laughing, trying to make him smile. When the little one stretched his arms toward her, she clapped her hands and cried out with delight. "I'm the happiest sister in the whole wide world." Martha Lou and Elias both laughed. Elias stood, slipped his arm around his wife's shoulders, and together they watched their children play. The boy reached for his sister, and Rose spun around him, as if to protect him and keep him laughing. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold. Martha looked up at Elias and felt deep in her heart that everything she had waited for so long had finally come true. She had a husband who loved her, a daughter they had saved from loneliness, and a son born of their love. The years of pain and humiliation were behind her. and before them stretched a road they would now walk together, as a true family. Martha Lou had walked a road that would have broken many. She lost a child, endured poverty and humiliation, and lived with a husband who cared more for cards than for his own family. She knew the taste of tears, sleepless nights, and despair. But life did not leave her in darkness forever. God gave her a second chance. By her side stood the man who had loved her since youth. Elias showed her, not with big promises but with steady actions, what true devotion meant. He healed both her body and her heart, gave her strength when she had none left. His care became her medicine, his love the home where, for the first time, she felt safe and warm. Rose, the little girl who had lost her parents, found a family she had only dreamed of. For Martha Lou and Elias, she became a daughter, and later an older sister to their baby boy. Laughter filled the home that once knew only silence. And Caleb was gone. The dusty roads took him away, along with his broken promises and endless gambling debts. He made his choice, and that choice led him far from them. This story reminds us that sometimes God closes one door so we can see another that was open all along. The most important thing is not to turn away from the hand that holds ours, from the one who stands with us in silence and in hardship. Now let me ask you, dear friends, when should we forgive, and when is it time to walk away? Share in the comments what you felt, and which moment of this story struck you most. If this story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe. There are many more warm and human tales ahead, stories to bring comfort and light. Thank you for being here. May peace and goodness be with you and your loved ones. Until next time.